And this morning, to break with tradition, would you please remain seated as I read the gospel? The Holy Gospel according to John in the 6th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Pontius Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" And Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So you are a king?" And Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." This is the gospel of our Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
The Reverend Susan Sparks, senior pastor of Madison Avenue Baptist Church in New York City, has published a wonderful sermon online contrasting two kings: Elvis Presley, the king of rock, and Jesus, the king of all creation. You may remember comedian Adam Sandler's comparison of the two men. Jesus said, "Love thy neighbor." Elvis said, "Don't be cruel." Jesus is part of the Trinity. Elvis's first band was a trio. Jesus is the Lord's shepherd. Elvis dated Sybil Shepherd. And you'll find lots of other more clever comparisons on various websites. Well, Pastor Sparks notes that the devotion that many people still have for Elvis. She says that not long ago, while in Memphis, Tennessee, she visited Sun Records, where Elvis recorded his first song. In the studio, there was a nice big X on the floor with duct tape, indicating the exact spot where Elvis stood. The tour guide told them that just the week before, Bob Dylan had come into the studio, had not said a single word to anyone else. He walked over to the X, he knelt down, got on all fours, and kissed the X. And he walked out. Now that's a tribute from one rock legend to another. Well, Pastor Sparks also visited Graceland, Elvis Presley's home. As she waited in line to buy tickets, she turned to one of the tour guides and asked, "So, how long did Elvis actually live here?" Well, the guide looked at her with shock and whispered, "Don't use the past tense around here." And then she pointed to her T-shirt, which said, "Graceland, where Elvis lives." It didn't matter that she had never actually seen Elvis, she was too young, or that technically Elvis stopped walking this earth in 1977. It didn't matter. She didn't care. Elvis fans don't care. Without any proof, they believe he lives. Elvis lives, baby. The king lives. And not only that, Pastor Sparks said, because they believe he lives, Elvis fans go out into the world and share his message. They play Elvis music. They dress up as Elvis impersonators. They decorate their homes with Elvis memorabilia. Pastor Sparks said that one of her favorite things at the Graceland gift shop was an Elvis sprinkler for the lawn. It stood about a foot high, and when it was sprinkling your yard, Elvis's hips shook. And then she added an interesting thought. Whether through word or music, impersonators or sprinklers, Elvis fans proudly proclaim the message of the King. Well, welcome on this last Sunday of the church year. It's celebrated as Christ the King Sunday. In other churches, it is celebrated simply as the reign, the rule of Christ. And the simple question I have for each of you this day is, who is the king of your life? Am I a Jew? Pilate responded in our gospel for today. Because Pilate had been interrogating Jesus before his crucifixion. Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus responded. "Or did others talk to you about me?" And Pilate replied, "Am I a Jew? Your own people and the chief priests handed you over to me. What is it that you have done?" And Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "Are you a king then?" Pilate said. And Jesus answered him somewhat cryptically, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." Well, if Pilate thought he could intimidate Jesus, he was sorely mistaken. If Pilate thought he was in control of this situation, he was also sorely mistaken. He might turn his prisoner over to the mob to be persecuted, but if he did, he would simply be following the script laid out before the beginning of time, that the Son of God would give his life, notice, give his life, so that all God's children might one day find life through him. So the question for today, who is your king? Everybody worships somebody or something. If it is not Christ, it is something or someone less worthy. One of the 20th century's most perceptive theologians, Paul Tillich, once said that whatever is our ultimate concern in life, that is our God. It might be our appearance. It might be our bank account. It might be some popular media personality. It might be our allegiance to our country, or the quest for scientific truth, or a host of important concerns. Everybody worships somebody or something. What is it in life you value the most? Some say it's my family, and that's good. However, do you value your family more than you value God? Tough call, isn't it? Some missionaries have made that decision. And it's one thing for a missionary to put themselves at risk serving Christ in a dangerous situation. But how about their spouse or, heaven forbid, their children? Is your family your greatest priority? Evangelical researcher and author George Barna says that studies show that in the United States, far more people are willing to die for their country than they are to die for their faith. That's very revealing. Who is your king? Who or what do you worship? Biblical faith insists that God alone is worthy of our worship. Such faith may demand extraordinary sacrifices. Michael Maudlin, in an article in Christianity Today magazine, once told about a person who was willing to make Christ the ruler of his life. Before co-founding Habitat for Humanity, Millard Fuller was a successful businessman who one day followed his estranged wife, Linda, to New York to try to convince her to come back to him. She was not easily convinced that he could turn back from his headlong rush for material wealth. Millard recalls, "We were in a taxi right after Linda and I had had a very tearful session. We had gone to the Radio City Music Hall and they showed a movie, Never Too Late. It was about a woman who became pregnant after she thought it was too late. And the message was that it's never too late to change anything. He said, I had a sensation of light in the taxi. And it wasn't anything spooky. All I can say is it just came into my head, give your money away, make yourself poor again, and throw yourself on God's mercy. And so he turned to his estranged wife, Linda, and said, I believe that God just gave me the idea to give all our money away, give everything away. And Linda said, I agree, let's do it. Well, friends, family, even pastors tried to talk them out of it. But Millard Fuller believed that God was calling them to live a radically new life. And they ended up building one of the great ministries for helping people of modern times, Habitat for Humanity. Millard Fuller and his wife gave everything away. Now, not everyone is called to a sacrifice like that. But would you be willing to if Jesus called you to?
Not everything. You gotta have money to pay your bills.
And that's the question for today. How much? Bishop William Williman says that he's still haunted by a long conversation he had with a man who had been a member of one of his early congregations. This man sat down and told Williman that one evening, returning from a night of poker with some of his buddies, he had a stunning vision of the presence of the risen Christ. Christ appeared to him undeniably, vividly, he said. And yet, as he talked to Pastor Williman, he said this event shook him and stirred him deeply, but that in 10 years since it happened, he had never told anyone about it until Pastor Williman. So Pastor Williman pressed him, what was the reason for your silence? Were you embarrassed? Were you fearful that others would mock you or fail to believe that this had actually happened to you? And the man explained it this way. No, he said, the reason why I told no one was I was too afraid that it was true. And if it's true that Jesus was really real and that he had personally come to me, what then? I'd have to change my whole life, he said. I'd have to become some kind of radical or something. And I love my wife and my family, and I was scared I'd have to change, to be somebody else. It might destroy my family if the vision was real. It's a powerful thought, wouldn't you agree? If Jesus is real, and if you should encounter him, what are the implications of that experience? I guess under such circumstances, we would discover who really is the king of our life. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. faced that question. Preaching in front of the Ebenezer Baptist congregation in Atlanta, a congregation that he loved, Dr. King told them just 2 months before his untimely death how he would like to be remembered. And in doing so, he zeroed in on that ultimate question: if Christ is king, what does that mean? Dr. King in his sermon told them, if Christ is ruler of our lives, then my Nobel Peace Prize is less important than my trying to feed the hungry. If Christ is king, then my invitations to the White House are less important than that I visited those in prison. If Christ is Lord, Dr. King said, then my being Time magazine's Man of the Year is less important than that I tried to love extravagantly, dangerously, with all my being. Dr. King was right, wasn't he? If Christ is real, if he is king, then nothing else matters quite as much as that one fact. Why? Because we know we can trust God with our families, with our personal destinies, with everything that is important to us. We can face the future confidently, triumphantly, if Christ is king. On July 20th, 1969, you may remember that U.S. astronaut Neil Armstrong became the first human being to set foot on the moon. President Richard Nixon acclaimed the event as the greatest singular event since the creation of the world. Armstrong himself, as he took the last step from the ladder from his lunar module onto the moon's surface, he said, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." A devout Christian, Armstrong later visited the old city of Jerusalem, and at the Hulda Gate, which leads to the Temple Mount, Armstrong wanted to know if Jesus had actually walked on these very steps. Assured that Jesus did, Armstrong said, "I have to tell you, I am more excited stepping on these stones than I was in stepping on the moon." Why was he so excited? Because Christ is king of all creation, the moon and the stars and the stones in Israel. In Berlin, in an art gallery, there is a painting by the famous artist Adolf Menzel that's only partially finished. It is supposed to be a painting of King Frederick of Germany. In the painting, Frederick is talking to his generals. So Menzel painstakingly painted all of the generals first in a circle. Menzel left the king until last, leaving a bare patch in the middle of the painting with the background of all the generals. But sadly, Menzel died before he could finish the painting. So there's his painting full of the generals, but no king. That's a metaphor for how many people are living their lives with no king. It doesn't work. Everybody worships something or somebody. Ultimately, if we do not worship Christ, we worship ourselves. And the only problem with that is that we cannot save ourselves. And so the question, is Christ king of your life? Amen.